Hi everybody, just making sure you can see me this time. So this is a discussion on professional disclosure, informed consent form, and I found one from an LMFT, LPC in private practice in Oregon, and it's pretty succinct. I think it actually looks pretty good. The first couple times I looked at it, I thought it was a little thin on some areas, so I'll talk about that a little bit, but pretty clearly just sort of has a statement at the beginning just basically saying it's to assist the client to understand policies and rights, and the counselor's background, therapist's background and procedures and policies. Has a nice philosophy and approach, talks about her, like her credo, of counseling, and some of the approaches that she uses, and basically why to do counseling with individuals and families that she identifies, and sort of like, kind of what the idea is behind and the goal, of counseling, a little bit of her philosophy. And it doesn't go on and on. It's nice. It's actually really nicely worded. And then mentions her formal education and training. So per ACA guidelines, that needs to be identified, your background, schooling, in fact, you have a master's degree or what level you're at. And then she notes all of the other training she's had in various approaches like EFT or marriage, couple, family, all those things. So, and then states that she's in continuing education and consultation. Mentions, where she's licensed through the Oregon Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists, and to maintain that talks about taking further education and classes that are relevant to the profession, and continuing to develop herself professionally, and then goes into fees. So pretty extensive on fees. Talks about having an initial phone consultation to see if this will be a fit for both client and counselor. And then mentions, fee amounts and things for 50-minute sessions and how those are payable and all of that. So, and that they're subject to increase and things like that. Also states on here there's some sessions at reduced costs for those in financial need, which is nice. So that recognizes not everybody has the ability to pay that fee, and maybe provides a sliding scale kind of idea for people with financial needs. So it's kind of nice to put that out there. That helps some clients who might have that as a barrier. And just says open to discuss. Just mentions, be on time for your appointment, cancellations, that kind of thing. So got a cancellation policy at least 24 hours in advance and that. So that's pretty standard, I think, to the profession. Emergencies, that's nice. Stated here to call, these crisis lines through the counties. Women's crisis line, call 911 if it's life-threatening situations, so it kind of outlines that. And then talks about your privacy and communication. So cell phones, fax communications could be breached. So just noting those in, being like concerned about that if you communicate those ways. It mentions code of ethics. So under the licensee of the Oregon Board, licensed LPCs, licensed professional counselors and therapists, that she abides by the code of ethics under that, and mentions about professional interactions, that's what the relationship is limited to, and actually puts in the statement, if we run into each other somewhere, I will respect your privacy and confidentiality, but by not acknowledging you. And then it says, unless you initiate contact. But of course, looking at that would be like, still, that's an area that you have to be careful. It's kind of hard, and I've heard sometimes in schools, like, if a child client, sees their counselor, like, coming in, like, say, the outside counselor, maybe not the school counselor even, or I don't know how that works, but it's like, oh, there's my counselor, and so then, other people know that they're going for counseling, and so they've kind of reached their own confidentiality in a way, but how does the counselor respond? I think this was one question that came up for me. It's like, you run into someone out there in the public, or maybe go to the same church. Sometimes I've heard that, and even like a child might blurt something out, or you sort of, the client thinks, oh, I can have a chat with my counselor, or they might forget about their own confidentiality. So that was kind of an interesting statement in there, and it's certainly something we've talked about in classes before, like of running into clients out in the public, and definitely the counselor doing nothing that would indicate anything, you know, not saying a thing, or even sometimes kind of ignoring the client or something. So that's kind of, you know, maybe a brief hi, but not, you know, obviously not going into why you have that relationship. So, so that's definitely a big ethical situation. And then client rights are stated, so going into all that, you know, reporting complaints to the board and have the right to, you know, see notes and things like that. And then there's just at the very end, talks about privacy and confidentiality. So of course, and actually has a typo in there. So talking about, you know, everything will be confidential. It should say including the following exceptions, I think, but it says including the following expectations. And I think that's the wrong word, but so that's something that this therapist should really look at and correct, probably, because, and then she lists, you know, reporting suspected child abuse, reporting danger to client or other people, you know, legal issues, other things. So I felt that part was a little thin on here, and you know, especially with that typo, should be expanded a little bit, explained a little bit more, I think. So I feel like it was just kind of glossed over it. I feel like overall this professional disclosure statement is going for brevity, whereas I think some things need to be unpacked a little bit. You know, you don't want to hand a client 12 pages, that's for sure. They're not going to read all that. But, you know, and I did see another, when I first searched for these, I found another one that was extremely wordy, and it sort of repeated a lot of the same stuff over and over. And I'm like, this is not accessible to the client, and this is not, you know, it's kind of a language thing. Even if it's simple language, but it's going on and on, the client, it's going to be a barrier to most people, I think, to read all that. So I think this one has gone for a little bit more simplicity, and I think it's pretty good. I'm remembering like things that I've seen on this, but I think it's, you know, something where you have to weigh it a little bit, like maybe go into more detail on things where you need to, especially with the confidentiality. I think it's kind of written in a way that maybe the counselor understands, but not the client. So, and in the ACA Code of Ethics, they do talk about it, you know, being accessible and being in language that they can understand. So, and then the last part is just, of course, consent to treatment with client signature and date. So, and I kind of compared it to my professional disclosure statement. So, you know, I have the same things, like describing, you know, starting with kind of my philosophy and beliefs around counseling and ideas, and then my background and training in that. And so with client rights and confidentiality, I used kind of a wording that my professor, he provided us with an example and encouraged us to, you know, tweak it a little bit, but, you know, said like this is, you know, to the best of his knowledge, a well-researched like way to explain and cover confidentiality. So it's like a paragraph, but it's not overly long. So, you know, and just basically stating, yeah, I'm a mandatory reporter in the state of Oregon and that kind of thing. So it goes into client rights, and then also has emergency contact on there. So it's really important because clients can be in crisis in between sessions or at the beginning, maybe especially, or whatever. So, you know, letting them know where else they can contact, you know, especially if they can't always get a hold of you, or, you know, or in the moment and need help. So the site I'm working at is really good. They have, of course, crisis lines. They have, you know, all kinds of ways to reach us, and then they encourage people also to go through the county if they, none of the other that works, or how they feel comfortable with accessing. So, and so, yeah, as I noted in my other post, ACA has, they go over this disclosure statement, or the Oregon Board of Regulations, rules and regulations really stress the importance of the professional disclosure statement and presenting it to clients, and that, you know, you basically can't enter into a professional counseling relationship without it. And the article I found on that was basically also talking about that too, like, it's the same thing, like they were talking about how it is a living document, and, you know, it's very important to have it updated and having it current and that kind of thing. So just looking for that a little bit.